So just to remind everybody to just write present in the chat box. Okay. Okay, so I'll start the lecture. So today we will try to finish the space-time part so that we can start with the classical conformal field theory. So I'll start by summarizing whatever we have done till now, and then I will then discuss the 2D part which was left last time, and then we will start the classical conformal field. So just to summarize, we were looking at so it's a summary. Uh, we were looking at the definition of conformal transformations. In a d-dimensional space-time. And these were defined as coordinate transformations x mu to x prime mu such that the invariant length such that the distance, sorry, not the invariant length, such that the length which is defined as ds square equal to eta mu nu dx mu dx nu. This goes to ds prime square, which is some local factor, local scale factor times the same. Okay, so that means that it's a and the other way of saying it is that geometric way of saying it is that these are angle preserving transformations. Angle preserving transformations. So we can also write this in terms of the in terms of the eta mu nu, that eta mu nu del x prime mu del x alpha del x prime nu del x beta. For Lorentz transformation, this would have been just eta alpha beta, but now you can also have f of x. Did somebody say something? I couldn't hear.
Yeah. Can you hear?
Yeah.
Okay.
No, did you say something?
No.
Okay. All right. So these are the so conformal transformations are those under which the metric transforms in this way. Okay. And so these conformal transformations they have a subset. So rather I should they contain Poincare transformations. These Poincare transformations are a subset of conformal transformations because these preserve angles while these preserves angle and distance and length. So in that sense, these are a subset of these transformations. Also, you can see from here that if I take fx equal to 1, then you get Poincare transformations. Okay, so in that, so you can understand that these are a subset of these transformations. And to preserve causal structure, one second. Just give me a second. I'll be back. Yeah, sorry. So to preserve causal structure, that means to preserve so time-like to time-like and space-like to space-like. That means those if we want to say that time-like events should remain time-like events and space-like events should remain space-like event, we need to also say that fx has to be greater than 0. It has to be a positive function. Okay, and so and then we introduced
not true for
the hello.
right? Hello.
Sorry. Yeah.
This is not true for Euclidean space, right?
Yeah, Euclidean, there is no concept of this thing, but in Euclidean case you need it to be still positive, because you need the lengths are positive in a Euclidean space. So even there it is necessary, because the lengths are positive, you don't want to become negative, because length in a Euclidean is always positive.
Actually, it can be thought like z goes to z and z prime goes to z in Euclidean.
Z goes to,
I mean, in Euclidean complex comes here. Z goes to z and z prime goes to z prime. Z bar, sorry.
no, Z goes to Z, Z bar goes to Z bar.
Yeah.
No, that first of all, Z bar is only in 2 dimensions. This is in any dimension.
Okay.
No, this is just saying that your distance, I mean, even if for Euclidean this is the same thing, because in the Lorentzian case it would mean you're preserving causal structure, but in Euclidean you're just saying that the distance has to be positive, so that has to be preserved. That's all. Okay, so yeah, and then we saw that for then we looked at the special case of continuous conformal transformation. And these are those which are, that is those which are built from infinitesimal transformations. Those that are built from infinitesimal transformations, and here we introduce the concept of a conformal killing vector, CKV, conformal killing vector. These are simply those infinitesimal transformations which satisfies this equation, that del mu epsilon nu plus del nu epsilon mu is 2 by d eta mu nu del rho epsilon rho. So these are the conformal killing vectors. If it was just a killing vector, not the conformal, then the right hand side would have been 0. But here you have this extra, this source term, and this is the conformal killing vectors. And then we solve this. We solve this in d dimension. So d greater than 2. We got we saw that the set of transformations are Poincare transformations. Constant scaling, and what are called the special conformal transformations. So here you had x prime mu is x mu minus b mu x square over 1 minus 2 b dot x plus b square x square, where b is the parameter which labels these transformations, and the Poincare transformation we know is just Lorentz transformation plus translation. So you have a Lorentz matrix lambda mu nu plus some constant which we call c mu. And scaling just means scaling. So x prime mu is some constant times x mu. So these are the transformations in d greater than 2. And then we also saw that these continuous conformal transformations form the group, or rather is isomorphic to the group SO d comma 2 or SO d plus 1 comma 1. This is if the metric eta mu nu is Lorentzian, this is if it's Minkowski, and this if eta mu nu is just Euclidean, meaning it is just all same sign. Okay, so this was these are the things, and this we checked. The other thing we said was that so this I should have said earlier that the transformations we had were of this type, that any conformal transformation is of this type. And because f of x is since it's positive, I can rewrite this as eta mu nu 1 by square root of f times del x prime mu del x alpha times 1 by square root of x del x prime mu del x beta equal to eta alpha beta. And from here we immediately see that this matrix, this object, the solution to this equation is that this is the Lorentz matrix in d dimensions, because this is a definition of Lorentz transformation. That Lorentz transformation, those transformations which keep the metric invariant. So this is by definition. So Lorentz transformation by definition is this. This L means Lorentz. This is the definition of Lorentz transformation. So so therefore from here we see that from here we can immediately see that a conformal transformation, which is del x prime del x alpha, is up to a local factor a Lorentz transformation. So, but of course, this will now be a position dependent Lorentz transformation, because this matrix can be a function of x, and this is a So this is a conformal transformation. So a general conformal transformation is a local scaling times a local Lorentz transformation. Local Lorentz transformation means it can be a function of x. That's what I mean. So you are rotating it locally and you're scaling it. That is what you are effectively doing. That's a conformal transformation. And then we check that this is we check that that this is that all conformal transformations can be written in this form. So the only non-trivial one was the special conformal transformation, but I think I gave it to you as. By the way, I'll send you the exercises as a separate. I'm sorry, I forgot to do that. I'll send you the exercises as a separate question paper, as a separate assignment sheet by today or tomorrow, tonight or tomorrow. All conformation can be written in this form. And one of the things that I asked you to do is do the same thing, do this for special conformal transformation. Actually, we had done it in class, I think, and find this root fx and lambda mu alpha. So, okay. Now, so this was for d greater than 2. When we go to d equal to 2, then the things are slightly different. So I'll just restrict myself to the Euclidean case. The same thing happens for the Lorentzian one. So in the Euclidean case, conformal transformations are any holomorphic transformations. So that means any transformation. Oh yeah, there's one more. Sorry, I should say there's one more point I had mentioned that is very important. So let me first mention that, and then I will continue. Yeah. So one more point about this d greater than for this transformations is that when we look at the special conformal transformation, so you have to remember that these transformations are both for Euclidean and Lorentzian. Only thing that will change for Euclidean and Lorentzian is that this x square and this b dot meaning of b dot x and x square and b square will change. So in the case of Minkowski, then it will have one minus sign, and the case of Euclidean, it will have all plus sign or all same sign. So that is the only difference. Other than this formula is true for both Lorentzian and Minkowski. Just the definition of b dot x and x square b square will change. So so the point was that the point was that this transformation. So you can rewrite this in this form. You can write it as x mu minus x square minus b mu, the whole square over x mu by x square minus b mu. And we saw that this maps a finite point, that is x mu by x square equal to b mu. It maps it to infinity, because if you put x mu by x square equal to b mu, then you get x prime mu is equal to infinity. So this is only true for special conformal transformation. All other transformations like scaling and Poincare transformations, they will map finite points to finite points. Okay, but only this special conformal transformation can map a point which is a finite point to infinity. And the other way of saying other way of saying it, the same thing is that you can think of this special conformal transformation as inversion plus translation plus another inversion. That is actually quite clear from this way of writing it. So when we write it like this, you see, first you take x mu and then you invert it. So inversion means this one. Inversion means x mu goes to x mu by x square. Then you translate it, okay, by minus b mu, and then the whole thing you again invert. That is your special conformal transformation. Okay, so if you ever forget this formula, all you have to do is remember this thing, that it is inversion followed by a translation, then a inversion. So you start with x mu, okay, then you invert it, meaning you divide it by the x square, then you translate by an amount minus b mu. You can call it plus b mu also, doesn't matter, it depends on what b is. And then you invert the whole thing, which is x mu minus x square by mu the whole square. This is what is special conformal transformation. So this way you'll remember it, what it is. If you don't remember the formula, this is a simple way of remembering this. But so it's basically the inversion part which is mapping a finite point to infinity, because the inversion maps 0 to infinity. Okay, and the translation, what it does is that it translates 0 to b mu. So that is why when you do the special conformal transformation, it is a point x mu by x square equal to b mu that gets to infinity. But the reason why it maps a finite point to infinity is because there is an inversion involved in this. Okay, so so therefore, since it maps under special conformal transformation, finite points goes to infinity, we can say immediately that to make to make sense of these transformations, one has to include infinity in your set, infinity as a point on which it acts, on which conformal transformation acts. Because normally when we say let's say you take some Minkowski space or Euclidean space, we just mean all, if it's a flat space then just means all points on the flat space, but all points always means does not include infinity, because infinity by definition is something which you cannot reach. Okay, but you can reach by a special conformal transformation. So in that sense you can also think of it in this way, that there's a way of including infinity inside your set. So you have your full, let's say this is your flat space with some metric eta mu nu or delta mu nu if it's Euclidean. Then what it is doing is that it is your infinity, what you're calling infinity, is actually is mapped to a finite point, and this means that this transmission is not acting on Rd, but rather Rd union infinity, meaning you have to include infinity in your set of things. But when you define your space as Rd including infinity, this space is no longer, so this Rd was non-compact, meaning it has no boundary. There's no boundary, but this space has a boundary. In fact, it is, so we'll call it compact in the sense that it includes its bound. So what I mean by compact, non-compact is that whether it includes the boundary points or whether it does not include boundary points. So normally when we say Rd, then we just means all points. Rd just means that you're including all points, but x has to be less than infinity, because infinity is not a point. But the special conformal transformation, then you have to include this infinity also as a point. And then once you include infinity as a point, so all your points which are infinitely far away, you have to include as a single point, and that means this has become compact. But then this is the same as a sphere, meaning sphere meaning not in the sense that it is x square plus y square plus z square equal to r square, but only in the sense that it has no boundary. Okay, it has no boundary because the boundary is included in it. The other way of saying it is that you can map this, once you include infinity, you can map it by a stereographic projection to the sphere like this. Okay, so topologically this has the same it's a technical word, we say topologically is the same as a sphere. Okay, so this Rd cross Rd with the points at infinity is what is called a Riemann sphere. Riemann sphere. Okay, so it is just, it's a sphere only in this. So the sphere means that it is it includes a point at infinity. It is in that sense it's a sphere. Okay,
Sir, can you repeat this part?
yeah. So what I'm saying is that this special conformal transformation, if you put in this formula, if you put x mu by x square equal to b mu, okay, so x mu by x square equal to b mu means x mu is equal to b mu by b square. So you can show that x mu by x square equal to b mu is same as saying that x mu is b mu by b square. So if you take this point, which is b mu by b square, then this point under special conformal transformation is mapped to infinity. That means it goes away from the plane. It is not a finite point. Okay, but then that would mean that the special conformal transformation is not well defined, because it is taking a point to infinity, and infinity is not a point in your set, because infinity by definition is what you cannot arrive at, right? So the only way you can make sense of this, so the way what we say is that we say that the special conformal transform or the conformal transformations is defined not on the plane or not on the Rd. Rd meaning the d-dimensional flat space. Okay, it is not defined on d-dimensional flat space, because a d-dimensional flat space by definition is a set of points which does not include infinity, but rather it is defined on Rd union with infinity. Okay, meaning you think of infinity as a point and then include that point in your space. So it is Rd union with the points at infinity. Okay, but once you have included the point at infinity, and then this special conformal transformation takes you to infinity, but all the points are all infinity points are the same. You cannot distinguish which whether it is this infinity or this infinity. You cannot distinguish, because it just means that after you take, if you take this, it becomes x prime mu becomes infinity. So that infinity can be any of the infinity. So basically you have you're not only you're including infinity, you're also identifying all the points. All the points of infinity are identified as a single point by these special conformal transformations. Okay, so this all points at infinity is now labeled by a single point, which I'm just calling as infinity. This is just a label now. It's a single point. Okay, and then this space is the space on which your conformal transformation acts. Is this clear? So here the first statement is that your under special conformal transformation, b mu by b square, the point b mu by b square, x mu equal to b mu by b square, is mapped to infinity. Okay, so therefore it is not well defined. The special conformal transformations are not well defined on RD, that is the flat space, d-dimensional flat space, because by definition flat space means all finite points, not the point at infinity, because there is no such thing as infinity. Okay, so when you are saying that it takes a point to infinity, you have to say that you have to include this point infinity as a point in your space. Okay, now how do you do that? Not only have to include infinity, you have to say that you have all points at infinity is just one point, the same point, and that point is included in your set. How do you include a point at infinity? Well, that is what I give an example of the stereographic projection. That you take this space, and then you take a sphere, and then you just draw straight lines from the sphere, from the north pole of the sphere. You have done this stereographic projection in many times. So you do this projection, then then this line it cuts the sphere at one point and cuts this plane at one point. So this point here, so this point is mapped to this point is mapped to this point, and so on. In particular, the point, if you draw a parallel line, if you make a parallel line, that this point gets mapped to infinity. Okay, so therefore you can say that if you including infinity means that you're basically saying that your space is topologically the same as a sphere, because a sphere, by doing a stereographic projection, you can map the sphere to a plane including infinity. Okay, so that's why we say that the conformal transformations actually act on a sphere, d-dimensional sphere. Okay, and this sphere is called the Riemann sphere. It's just RD along with the point at infinity. Okay. Yeah. So it is the fact that the special conformal transformation can take you away to the point at infinity that makes this space topologically a sphere. Okay, because by translation you can never reach infinity. By translation you can never reach infinity. By rotation you can never reach infinity. Even by scaling you cannot reach infinity. Okay. But I mean finite translation you cannot reach infinity. Finite rotation you cannot reach infinity. Finite scaling also you cannot reach infinity. But by a finite special conformal transformation you can reach infinity. So this is so therefore this is acting on not just RD but RD union infinity, and that is topologically the same as a sphere. And therefore we say that the natural reaction of this is not on RD but the Riemann sphere. So this is again a difference from the Poincare transformations, because Poincare transformation will never take you to infinity. That is the difference. Okay. Now we can go to d equal to 2. So in d equal to 2, and let's take Euclidean, but everything I say also carries over to Lorentzian, Euclidean case. In fact, from now on, I'll only be doing Euclidean case even for d greater than 2, because when we do the field theory, quantum field theory, we will get all results in the Lorentzian field theory by doing a Wick rotation from the Euclidean field theory, which I will tell you. So you'll do all calculations in the Euclidean field theory. In fact, that is how we will define the correlation functions in the Lorentzian field theory, as by a Wick rotation from the Euclidean field theory. So everything I do will be in the Euclidean case, and then Lorentzian case will follow by analytic continuation. So the Euclidean case, d equal to 2 means you have two coordinates, x and y. But if you write this in terms of Z and Z bar, then a conformal transformation is simply a holomorphic transformation, any holomorphic transformation. Okay. So conformal, sorry, did anyone ask any question? Okay. So a conformal transformation is any holomorphic transformation. This thing. So therefore it has actually infinite, so this is an infinite number of generators. In that, in the above, in the for d greater than 2, the number of generators was d plus 2 c2, because that's the number of generators in SOD d plus 2 dimensional SOD plus 2. So here you have infinite number of generators, because you can do because f of z, f is arbitrary function, so you could take f can take arbitrary form, and each of them is a conformal transformation. And if you now ask for what are the continuous conformal transformations, so that just means that you take z prime is z, and you take this f of z to be some infinitesimal function. And what does infinitesimal function mean? Well, how can a function be infinitesimal? What it means is that in this case, since it is it's a complex this thing, if you do a LoRa expansion, let's say this is a function, you do a LoRa expansion around z equal to 0, let's say, then you can write this as epsilon n times n sum over n, and n is from minus infinity to plus infinity. Infinitesimal transformation means that these epsilon n's are small, infinitesimal numbers. Okay, that's what it means. So you write, so when you do a infinitesimal conformal transformation, you means that you do this, that it is this is the general form. And then as we said when we are discussing the d greater than 2 case, the way to find the generator is to just write this as this whole thing. You can write in the following way, that so this z plus sum over n equal to minus infinity to infinity epsilon n zn. So I'll write it as zn plus 1. It doesn't matter because it's just a label. So I'll write it as zn plus 1. Yes, please.
Here epsilon n are small, all because epsilon z is an infinitesimal function.
Yeah. So what I mean by infinite function is that those coefficients are small. Small coefficients.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So we had discussed this earlier also, that whatever is this thing, you just add a derivative. So you can write this as sum over n equal to minus infinity to infinity epsilon n z n plus 1 dz acting on z. You can write it like this, and then as I said that the generator is just this quantity. This is the generator, and we define ln's to be minus zn plus 1 del z. This minus is just a convention, so you define ln as minus zn plus 1 del z. Okay, is it okay? This is exactly how we did it earlier. Whenever you see this thing, just multiply with corresponding. In the higher dimension it was del mu, but here it is del z. So this is, and similarly you can do it for z bar, and you get an ln bar which is minus z bar n plus 1 del z bar. And then we can check that this ln satisfy an algebra. That means they close among, if you do a commutator, they will close, and this will be n plus m, or I think it's n minus m times ln plus m, and this is called the Witt algebra. So you get the same thing here. These are two independent copies. Yeah, and also ln comma lm bar is 0. So these are just two independent copies. One is on the z, one is on the z bar, and they will not, because derivative of z. Yeah, so ln comma lm bar is 0. Okay, so these are, so both of them are called Witt algebras. So what you get is two copies of the Witt algebra. So the generators is two copies of the Witt algebra. Okay, and so this is it. But these generators, even so, we have written infinite number of generators, Zn plus 1 times del z. Okay, but these generators are not well defined everywhere.
Sir,
See,
two
yeah,
copies of Witt algebra means.
meaning there is ln and ln bar.
Okay.
Yeah, two copies means there is one set of algebra with ln and the one with the ln bar, and they commute with each other. So two copies of Witt algebra means the two copies. ln is there and l bar n is there. Okay.
Sir,
Now you see,
sir, what is the meaning? I mean, difference between dimension of the space and dimension of the generator or algebra?
dimension of the, I didn't understand the question.
Dimension of space-time, for example, Euclidean or Minkowski, and dimension of the algebra.
No, dimension of space-time means how many coordinates there are. So here it is, in this case, it's 2 dimension, higher dimension, it will be d, whatever is the space-time dimension. So we are in 4 dimensions. That is the dimension of space-time. Dimension of the, not the dimension of the algebra, it's the number of generators of the, yeah. So number of generators of the number of generators, or number of these, that is the dimension. I don't know, dimension of the, did I use that word, dimension of the algebra? Yeah, okay, infinite dimensional. Yeah, so dimension means number of generators. Here in the case of algebra, it means number of generators. How many lns are there? So here there are clearly infinity, because for every n there is a generator. So there are infinite number of infinite dimensional. So that's why it's an infinite dimensional algebra. Okay, but the space-time dimension is 2 in this case.
Okay.
So
Sir.
algebra dimension just means how many generators there are. So these are the generators, but these generators are not globally defined. It's not defined everywhere. Not globally defined. Why it's not globally defined? Because, well, let's look at this. Suppose you take, if you take n less than -1, then this blows up at in 0, z equal to 0, because it becomes in the denominator, and these generators become infinite, right? So ln for n less than -1 is not defined at n equal to z equal to 0. So it's not defined everywhere. It's not defined as z equal to 0, for instance. Okay, so ln is not defined as z equal to 0 for
Sir,
n less than -1. Yeah.
when you are expanding this function in LoRa series, then
Yeah.
you're assuming that there is no pole at z equals to 0. So why we are putting at z equals to 0 for
No,
n
no.
minus 1?
No,
Because
sorry, what?
Actually,
because if it
n goes to minus infinity to plus
No.
infinity. There means at 0 there will be poles.
Yeah, no. So here you're saying you're doing a LoRa expansion around z equal to 0. Yeah. So when you do that, you always get one by z, but if you expand anything around about 0, if there's a LoRa expansion, then you'll get negative powers. That is always the case, right?
yeah, but in this case we are expanding in some region, I mean, where the function is well defined, but when
Yes.
the function is
So
divergent.
so that's what I'm saying, that these functions are not well defined everywhere. So for instance, this z equal, so for instance, that's exactly what I'm saying, that these functions are not well defined everywhere. For instance, if it's n is less than 1, it is not defined as z equal to 0. I'm saying exactly what you are saying. So if I expand around z equal to z naught, then this is well defined. Okay, the n negative ones are well defined, but it is not well defined for around z equal to 0, and that is true for n less than -1. What you're saying is exactly what I'm saying, that these are not well defined for n less than equal to -1, right? So this thing, you can think of it as well defined, but for not z equal to 0. Everywhere else it is well defined, but at z equal to 0 it's not well defined because it blows up, as you said.
Yeah, okay.
Is it
Okay.
okay? So that's exactly what I'm saying, that it is not well defined z equals to. So even though we have infinite number of generators, these are not, that's what I mean by saying globally defined. It is not defined everywhere. For instance, any n less than -1 is not defined at n equal to 0. Sorry, z equal to 0. Okay, but that is not the full story. Since as we saw in the above, for d greater than 2 case when we were discussing the special conformal transformations, when you look at this conformal group, you must also look at the action at z equal to infinity, because z equal to infinity is a point in your space. Okay, so that discussion still holds, because there will be an analog of special conformal transformation, as we will see. And there is also inversion in this case, because you can just take fz to be 1 by z. So that's an inversion, and then that takes z equal 0 to infinity, or z equal to infinity to 0. Sorry, z equal to infinity to 0. Okay, so so because we have to look at the action also at infinity, we must see how whether these functions are defined at infinity. Okay, it's not enough to look at finite points, but to also look at the whether they are defined at infinity, because as we saw some time back, that the conformal group acts on entire space including infinity. So if it was not infinity, then we don't have to bother about that. But because the conformal transformation also goes to infinity, for instance, just by doing an inversion, then it is important to check what happens at infinity. But to check, we have done it when we were doing conformal this complex analysis also. If you have to see how this function looks at infinity, you have to actually you have to take that point to a finite point. So if you have to look at the function's behavior at infinity, to check behavior at infinity, you change variables. You just take z equal to 1 by w, and then look at omega equal to 0, the one w equal to 0. Do you understand what I'm saying? So when we did complex analysis also, I think this is what we discussed, that if you want to see whether it has any poles at infinity or whatever, you have to do this transformation, then check whether there is a pole there. So two things. One, at z equal to 0, these are there are all an infinite number of them, that is all n less than -1 are not well defined. And second thing, but that is not enough, you have to also see whether it is well defined at infinity. And because as we saw earlier, the conformal group acts on all points including infinity. And to check whether they are well defined infinity, we have to actually make this transformation, because this will, and then look at omega equal to 0. So when you do this, you see here that dz is -1 by omega square d omega, and that immediately means that ddz is equal to minus omega square dd omega, right? So therefore you can look at ln will then go to minus this z will become 1 by omega to the power n plus 1, and then you'll have omega square on top dd omega, right? So ddz becomes omega square dd omega. The minus sign is not important, minus becomes plus, but that is not the important factor here. The important factor is the power of omega. Okay, and now you have to look at omega goes to infinity, goes to 0. So this is omega to the power minus n plus 1 dd omega del omega. And now you look at omega goes to 0, and now we see that if m is greater than 1, this is not well defined, right? So we can conclude from these 2 points that n greater than 1 and n less than -1 both are not well defined everywhere. These are not globally defined, meaning it is not defined everywhere. This is not well defined at z equal to 0, and this is not well defined at z equal to infinity. Okay, so the only set which is well defined everywhere, okay, on rd on R2 union infinity, so only set of transformations which is well defined everywhere on R2 union infinity is a set where n is between 1 and greater than -1. Okay. So what that means is that these transformations for general n, they make sense as long as you are defining them away from 0. So if you're looking at this ln, if you do these things away from 0, z equal to 1, z equal to 2, then n less than -1 is well defined. And similarly, if you're not looking at infinity, then n greater than 1 is also well defined. But if you're looking at what are the transformations which are well defined everywhere on R2 union infinity, then that is just a finite set, which is n between less than equal to 1 and greater than equal to -1. Is this okay? Is this clear, this part? All the others are not well defined either at 0 or at infinity.
Sir, we are free to expand this around any point that is not 0.
Any point that is yeah.
Then any in less than -1 or in greater than 1, they are all defined.
Yeah.
But
No,
why
no.
we
So if you define it around any other point, then the epsilon z has to be written as z minus z naught to the power n, right? Because when you expand it around a certain point z0, then
Yes.
if you're doing a, then you do like this.
Yeah.
So then again the same thing will happen, that for n less than -1, it will not be well defined at z equal to z0, and then n greater than +1 won't be well defined at z equal to infinity.
Oh yeah, okay.
Yeah.
So n less than -1 and n greater than 1 always problematic.
Always problematic, yes.
Okay, fine.
Sir, only the functions ln are well defined in this region, right? -1 to 1.
No, so ln for n -1 to +1 are the ones which are well defined everywhere on R2 union infinity. The others are not. They are locally, they can be defined at some point, but not everywhere. So the n less than -1 set is not well defined at z equal to 0, but it is well defined everywhere else, because these generators are does not blow up at z not equal to 0. And similarly, the n greater than 1 is well defined everywhere except infinity. Okay.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Basically question. Sir, previously we have taken that the set is including infinity.
Infinity, yes.
So why are we calling it is not well defined? Because we have taken infinity as part of the space.
No, it is well defined, but the set is in infinity, but the generators are not defined. No, the generator become infinite.
Yeah.
So generators are not defined. The set is R2 R2 union infinity, but all these generators are not defined there. So the n greater than 1, they become, as we saw here, the n is greater than 1, then this becomes infinity. So generators have become infinity, so they are not well defined. You understand? So even though you have this is the same as saying that this LoRa expansion, if you do around z equals 0, it blows up. The same thing that we are saying. So you're looking at those transformations, do not blow up. So you can do so see, the other way of saying it is that if you write down a function holomorphic transformation, okay, you cannot write down something which is holomorphic, which is analytic everywhere. It will have some singularity somewhere. You cannot have a holomorphic function which is analytic everywhere on the plane, including infinity. It will have poles everywhere. The only function which is analytic everywhere is a constant function. Okay, so it's just a statement of that, something like that.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. So okay, but so therefore, in that sense, we say that the ln for n. So we have a name for this. We call this n between n in this set, the n less than +1 and greater than -1. This set we call global conformal transformations. Global conformal transformation means it's globally defined, everywhere well defined. Global conformal. You can do these transformations everywhere. Okay, and then the others, that means for n, that means yeah. So all n, so all ln which do not belong to this set, these are called local conformal transformations. Local meaning they are defined locally, but they're not defined everywhere. Local conformal transformations. All right. And because these are not defined everywhere, you cannot exponentiate, meaning these things. So I'll come to that in a minute. And we will see that. So I'll just tell you nevertheless that even though the algebra is infinite dimensional, only this subset forms a group. Only this subset forms a group. So the global, so you have a infinite dimensional algebra, but the group is only the global conformal group, because only this is defined everywhere. If it is not defined, then you cannot form a group, because you don't know how to take an inverse. Okay, so only this set. So you have an infinite dimensional algebra, symmetry algebra, that the symmetry group is finite dimensional, which is a global conformal group. Okay, in the sense that it is defined everywhere, so you can take inverse, you can multiply them together at any point and so on. But these local transformations, you cannot do that, because it will blow up at z equal to 0 or z equal to infinity. So you cannot. So the rules, so the properties of groups will not be satisfied, because the inverse will not exist and so on. We will see that in other ways also. Yeah.
Sir, what do you mean by local conformal transformation? Means all in other than minus
Other
1
than,
plus
yes,
1?
yes, other than this set, local conformal transformation. Yes.
Okay, okay.
Yeah. I'll see why this is a group in another way also, but yeah. And this set, which is this global conformal algebra, how many are there? Well, there are 6 of them, because you have L, because everything I said is also true for L bar. So you have L1, L minus 1, L0, and you have L bar 1, L bar minus 1, and L bar 0. So there are 6 of them. 6 of them. Okay. And interestingly, if you had just used that formula SOD that we derived, that we had discussed for d greater than 2, which was SOD comma 2 or SOD plus 1 comma 1. If it's Euclidean, it is SOD plus 1 comma 1. If you just put d equal to 2, this is 4, because d plus 2 plus 1 is 3, 3 plus 1 4, and the SO4 we know has 6 generators. In fact, this is exactly the same as this set. This set will be precisely the same. So what we say here, and we will check this, that the global conformal group, we will see global conformal group is just equal to SO. It will be 3 comma 1 or SO 2 comma 2. So if it is Euclidean, it is SO 3 comma 1, and if it's Lorentzian, it is SO 2 comma 2. Okay. So the group is still the same, but the algebra is an infinite dimensional algebra. But only the global part becomes a group, and that is why we say that this actually, even though you have this big algebra, when we go to the quantum theory, we will only demand that the vacuum, the ground state, is invariant under this transformation, not under the full special conform or full Lorentz local conformal transformation. Okay, so this is something we will come to later, that the true symmetry of the theory is just the global conformal group, because it's defined everywhere. Okay, but nevertheless you have this infinite dimensional algebra, and that infinite dimensional algebra is very important because it will help you to constrain many things, but it is not a symmetry in that sense, because it's not well defined everywhere, and you will only demand that so even though the action will be invariant under the full local conformal algebra, infinite local conformal transformation, but the ground state we will demand will be only invariant under the global conformal group, not the local conformal transformations, and that will be important. Okay, is it clear up to now what I said? So the global part, which is defined everywhere, is still, there are 6 generators, and we will see that they are exactly the same as the conformal SO 3 comma 1, which is what you should get by a higher dimensional counting. Is the same thing you will get here. Only difference is that now you have many other local conformal transformations which are defined locally but not globally. All right.
So sir, only these 6 generators, I mean, the 6 of this part forms group,
Forms
and
group, exactly.
others
Yeah.
are not.
And
right?
only these are called the true symmetries of the theory. The others are not symmetries of the theory. There are some transformations under which the coalition functions transforms in a certain way, but it's not symmetry in the sense that the vacuum is not invariant under these transformations. In any case, they don't form a group. So yeah.
Sir, why only the discrete ones? I mean, 1 minus 1 0, not the other ones?
Not because they're not defined everywhere. So to form a group, you'll have to write the inverse and all these things. We will see why it is. I'll tell you in a different way why this is not a group. All right. In fact, I can tell you. Yeah. Sorry.
I mean, why only the discrete values of n?
They're all discrete. I mean, n is discrete only because you're doing a LoRa expansion, so n is discrete.
Okay.
N is not continuous. You're doing a LoRa expansion, right? The n will be discrete.
Yes, sir. Okay.
So if you do L0, then it is z prime is z plus epsilon 0 times z, right? N equal to 0 is epsilon 0. If you do L1, then it is z prime equal to z plus epsilon 1 z square. And if you do L minus 1, it is z prime equal to z plus epsilon minus 1 z, plus epsilon minus 1, because it was z n plus 1, so it will be epsilon 1. And similarly, you will have the same thing for L bar thing, that is z bar prime is z plus epsilon 0 bar times z bar. Z bar prime is z bar plus epsilon 1 bar z bar square. And the third one is z bar prime is z bar plus epsilon bar minus 1. Yeah, that's it, epsilon bar minus 1. Okay, and you can immediately see the following, that this transformation, these are translations, because it's a constant shift. So these are translations, and there will be two translations because it's two dimension, and that's why you have z is a complex number, so you have two coordinate, real and imaginary, so you got two translations. Okay, so this would correspond to, therefore, if you want in terms of x and y, the x prime is x plus epsilon minus 1 plus epsilon minus 1 plus epsilon minus 1 bar, right? I think it will be 2 x, yeah, so by 2, I think. And similarly, x is y prime will be y plus epsilon minus 1 minus epsilon bar minus 1 by 2i. So these are the so this is your translation in the x direction. This is a translation in the y direction. You can write it in terms of real coordinates. That's what I'm doing. So these are this thing. Now, if you look at the first one, L0, what is L0? So L0 is z plus epsilon z, but that is the same as z into 1 plus epsilon. And if you do an infinite version of this, it means some complex constant lambda times z. Okay, finite version is complex constant lambda times. But a complex constant can be written as mod lambda times e to the either phase theta lambda times z. And so this is z prime. And this means that r prime e to the I theta prime is equal to mod lambda e to the I theta lambda. So theta prime, r prime theta prime is the polar coordinates of z prime. And if I write the polar coordinates of z as r e to the I theta, I can then immediately say that r prime is mod lambda times r, and theta prime is theta plus theta lambda, right? And so we can immediately say that this corresponds to rotation and this corresponds to scaling, because in rotation, in two-dimension rotation, just means that take a complex number and then just change the argument theta. So that's what rotation does. And scaling is it is scaling the radial coordinate by lambda factor, mod lambda factor. So this is scaling. And so from here we can immediately deduce that L0 plus L0 bar, actually this corresponds to scaling, and L0 minus L0 bar, this will correspond to rotation. Why is this the case? Because if I do L0 plus L0 bar, I'll get the mod lambda part, because you're doing yeah. So how do we see this? That is L0 plus L0 bar. So your transformation, L0 would be z del z, right? And L0 bar is z bar del z bar. If you add these two, so this is L0 plus L0 bar. This is a minus sign, but let's forget the minus sign. You can show that this is equal to x del x plus y del y. And remember, when we were doing in higher dimensions, we had said that this is what scaling does. This is scaling. Okay, the exponential of this is scaling. And if you do L0 minus L0 bar, you can show it is x del y minus y del x. So this is rotation. So this is scaling and this is rotation. If you don't understand something, you can just ask me. Scaling, and this is rotation. Okay. And therefore, what is left is L minus 1 and L bar minus 1. There are two of them.
Sir, slide correct to, sir.
The special confirm. One second.
Slide is correct now. Okay. Sir, ठीक है जो. Sir, okay.
Okay, we can show that these are special conformal transformations. And so these transformations. So let's look at L minus 1. So now, just for this case, let's try to find what this thing is. So Z prime was given by Z plus epsilon 1 Z square. This is how it was written. And as we had said that you could write it down as 1 plus epsilon 1 Z square del Z acting on Z. And then we had I'm just trying to find the finite version of this. So what we do, we just exponentiate this, and you write this some variable, some a Z square del Z. This is the finite transformation corresponding to epsilon 1. It's a constant del Z acting on Z. This is how it was, right? Is it okay? What I'm just trying to find the finite version of this transformation. Is this okay, or do I have to explain it? This is just what we did in the higher dimension. Huh?
Okay.
And to find the transformation, what we have to do, we have to do a change of variable so that this can be written as a single derivative. So so the way to do it is you just take Z to be minus. So Z equal to minus 1 by omega will do the job, because then dz will be 1 by omega square d omega, and this is equal to 1 by omega square means Z square d omega. So from here we can say that Z square ddz is dd omega. So you can do this change of variable, and then this transformation becomes e to the a dd omega acting on Z. But what is Z? Z is minus 1 by omega. So Z prime is equal to this, and this is equal to minus 1 by omega plus a, right? And then you again substitute omega as minus 1 by Z, so you get minus 1 by Z plus a, and from here you get that Z prime is equal to Z over az minus 1. Sorry, 1 minus az. Okay, so just you can do it like so. This is the transformation, and so this is special conformal transformation. Scaling is Z prime equal to lambda Z, and the other one, so this is scaling and rotation both. So for lambda real, this is scaling, and the phase part is rotation. For lambda pure phase, it is rotation. For lambda real, it is scaling. Okay, and translation is of course Z prime equal to Z plus B, some constant. Okay, and in fact we can also derive this result that we got here directly from the higher dimension result. So because we know that the higher we know the special conformal transformation is written like x prime mu equal to x mu minus b mu x square over 1 minus 2 b dot x plus b square x square. Just take this to be x prime and y prime, and then you can show that this transformation in terms of x prime and y prime is, if you write a complex way, is exactly this transformation. Z prime is equal to z over 1 minus az. You can show that this transformation is exactly the same as this transformation if you write it in complex coordinates. I'm not showing this, but it's easy to show. So this will be one of the assignments that you can submit. It's just very easy. Just you have to do x plus iy, and then you'll get it. Okay. So actually, all these transformations you can write down in a single way. in fact. Okay, so you can write down a single way, and that single in a single expression, and that single expression is just this. So for different values of a and b, a, b, c, d, you will get different conformal transformations. All of them will be of this type. How do you see that? Well, first of all, you can look at the number of parameters. There should be 6 parameters. So how many parameters are there? There are 1, 2, 3, 4. That means 8 real parameters and 2 constraints, because this is a complex equation. So 2 constraints. Therefore, there are 6. Right. So 4 complex numbers with 2 constraints. Therefore, there are 6 parameters. Now let's check whether you get whether you can write all of them in this form. So suppose the number of parameters is the same. Now let's check whether you can explicitly write it down in this form. So first one is translation. So if I do a translation like this, shift by constant, how do I do this? So let's put it b. Then you have to take a equal to 1, okay, d equal to 1, c equal to 0, and b can be arbitrary. Then this and b. Then you should then you see this satisfies this equation, and it is of this form. So a is 1, b is b, d is 1, and c is 0. So then this is exactly of this form, and ad minus bc is 1. So we see the translation can be written in this form. All right. Now look at rotation. Sorry, both the z prime equal to lambda z, which is both rotation and scaling. All right. How do you write this in this form? When you can write it like this: root lambda times z plus 0 over 0 times z plus 1 by root lambda. Now you see, if you write it like this, it's clear that this is the same as this, right? But AD is 1 minus BC, which is 0. So AD minus BC is 1. Okay. So we've written that also. And now let's look at the last one, with special conformal transformation, which was z prime equal to z over 1 minus AZ. So this a can be minus plus whatever, it doesn't matter. So a is just a complex number, minus a is your this thing. But how can you write this? So well, you can write it as follows. You can write this as z 1 into z plus 0 over minus a into z plus 1, the same as that. So again, you have 1 into 1 is 1, and 0 into minus a is 0. So this again AD minus BC is 1. Okay, so this is also in the same form. A is 1 into z plus 0 times over minus a into z plus 1. So this is also the same form. So all of this are the same form with AD minus BC equal to 1. All right. Also, suppose I do 2 transformations. Suppose I do first transformation from z to z prime with some coordinate a, b, c, d, and then do another conformal transformation, general conformal transformation, which is z to z double prime with some new parameters a prime, b prime, c prime, d prime. Okay. So now, since it's a group, it is clear that this, if you do the single transformation, which is a double prime, b double prime, c double prime, d double prime, this should also satisfy the same equation that AD minus BC should be equal to 1. Since it's a group, or if it's a group, then it should satisfy this. So we are now checking whether it's a group or not. Okay. So let's do a transformation which is A, B, C, D. So now you see, if I choose this particular values, then I'm getting scaling, transformation, scaling, rotation, special conformal transformation, and translation. But I can choose A, B, C, D most general, where none of them are 0. So that means you're doing all of them together. You're doing translation plus scaling plus rotation and all of them together. Okay. So that is still because it's a group, it's still a conformal transformation. Okay. So now let's check that this is a conformal transformation. This is a group. Okay. So let's check that. So how do you check it? You first do z to z prime. Is it clear what I'm trying to do? Then this is given by I'm saying that just do 2 conformal transformations. This is the first thing. Now from here, let's do the second conformal transformation, which is z double prime is a double prime Sorry, this was A, I think. This is A, B, C, D. Do another transformation, which is Z double prime, which is A prime B, A prime Z prime plus B prime over C prime Z prime plus D prime. And I want to express this as a single transmission from Z to Z prime, Z to Z double prime. Is it clear what I'm doing? If it's not clear, I'll just explain once more. So first, I showed that all of this can be written. Each of these is a special conformal. Each of these is a conformal transformation. Each of these conformal transmission can be written as this transformation, AZ plus B over CZ plus D. Each of them can be written like this. All right, and this is the most general transformation. Most general transformation, meaning it's a linear combination of all of them. Okay, it's a linear combination of all of these transformations. So you can so this is a general transformation. And now we're seeing that we know that this should be a group because it should be the same as SO31. But because we know now, we know this SO31. How do I know this SO31? Because we have checked explicitly that one is rotation, one is translation, one is scaling, and one is special conformal transformation. And we have checked in D dimensions that group is SOD, 2 or SOD plus 1, 1. Okay, and since that's just algebra, it is true for any D, and therefore we know that this is the same. So we know that this set of transformations must be SO3, 1. That we know because we have written, when we write it in terms of X prime and Y prime, we know that this is SO3, 1. That is what we did when we did for general D. So we know that this transformation is SO3, 1 transformation. Okay, but it's just a different form. It's in the complex in terms of complex coordinates, it's looking like something divided by something, so it's looking like a different form. But it has to be SO3, 1 because we can rewrite it in terms of X and Y, and then it becomes SO3, 1. All right. So then the question is that in terms of this, how do you see that it's a group? Because SO31 is a group. So that is what we're trying to check, that if you do two of them, it should be same as doing a single one, because that's what that is a property of a group, that you should be able to do directly as A double prime Z, Z double prime should be A double prime Z plus B double prime over C double prime Z plus D double prime. If you do it two successive ones, it's the same as a single one, where A double prime D double prime minus B double prime C double prime should be also 1. Okay, that's what you have to check. Okay. And that's easy to check. Just substitute in this Z prime, just substitute this formula. So just substitute. If there's any question, please ask me.
Sir, how can I say that it is SO3, 1? Can you please repeat?
Yeah,
Means,
because as I gave you, as I told you, that as an exercise, you can show that this transformation is the same as this transformation. Okay, if you write in terms of X and Y, this Z prime equal to Z over 1 minus AZ is the same as this transformation. And then I also told you that that your other ones, like this, that this one is scaling and rotation, and this we know is translation. This one is translation. So this is translation, this is scaling and rotation, and this is special conformal transformation. And for these, the algebra we have already shown for general D, that this is SOD, this D plus 1, it's the same algebra as SOD plus 1, 1 if it's Euclidean. Remember, I gave an exercise, right, in terms of J mu, K mu, and all these things. The commutator.
Yes,
So that is the same. That exercise tells you that this is SO3, 1, because that algebra was isomorphic to SOD D plus 1, 1 if it's Euclidean.
okay, sir.
It's just when you write it in terms of Z, it is looking at it's looking at this form. It's looking like this. But in terms of X and Y, it will be the usual transformation that we wrote for general D. And there we had checked that the commutator is same as this thing. Okay. Other more simpler way to see that this is the same as SO3, 1 algebra is to just look at this algebra, which is L1, L minus 1. This algebra, L1, L minus 1 is equal to 2 times L0, and L1, L0 is equal to L1, and L minus 1, L. This is the Witt algebra, L minus 1. You can show that this is the same algebra as SO3, 1 algebra, plus the L bar. you can show that the SO3, 1 algebra can also be written in these two algebras are isomorphic. You can show that directly. Just you can relabel L1, L0 in such a way that you can it's the same as the SO3, 1 algebra. The same algebra actually.
Sorry, SO3, 1 means 3 space and 1 time.
3 space and 1 time. Yeah.
So,
That's
okay.
Okay. So just do this. This is A prime, and then you have B prime. Again, you put this. Sorry, B prime over C prime, and again you put for Z prime. You put AZ plus B over CZ plus D plus D prime, and this should be equal to A double prime Z plus B double prime over C double prime Z plus D double prime. Okay. And so then you can just compare. So if you see what happens, it is A prime plus B prime C. Sorry.
Yeah.
Plus A prime B plus D B prime D divided by A C prime plus D prime C Z plus B C prime plus D D prime. Can you is it clear that this is what you will get? Just
Yes.
multiply CZ plus D on the other side. So you get this A prime plus B prime CZ, B A prime plus B prime D, and here you have A C prime plus C D prime, and B C prime plus D D prime. Yeah, so it looks correct. And this is equal to A double prime Z plus B double prime over C double prime Z plus D double prime. Okay. And now just compare. So therefore you get A prime, A double prime is equal to A prime plus B prime C. B double prime is A prime B plus B prime D. C double prime is A C prime plus D prime C, and D double prime is B C prime plus D D prime. Okay. Now this, you might see that this is some very complicated numbers, but this is not actually complicated. In fact, if you just multiply these two matrices, suppose you have a matrix which is A B C D, and you multiply with this with A prime B prime C prime D prime, you'll exactly get these numbers. You'll get A prime plus B prime C, right? You'll get A prime plus B prime C, and this you'll get A prime B plus B prime D. Here you will get A C prime plus C D prime, and here you get B C prime plus D D prime. And that's exactly what you get here, right? So so you can say immediately that when you do a transformation like this, Z prime equal to AZ plus B over CZ plus D, and then you do another transformation which is Z double prime equal to A prime Z prime plus B prime over C prime Z prime plus D prime, then Z to Z double prime, which is A double prime Z plus B double prime over C double prime Z plus D double prime. You can get these coefficients by just thinking of this as matrices. Just multiplying the matrices, and if you do it many times, just keep multiplying these matrices, and then you'll get the A B C D for the for n times. If you do it n times, just keep multiplying for each of this A B C D times this thing, you'll get the answer for the nth one. Okay, but now look at the so what is A double prime D double prime minus B double prime C double prime? It's just the determinant of this one, right? But that is the determinant of this times determinant of this. But each of them determinant is 1. So this is also determinant 1. So you have proved that it's a group, right? Because the determinant condition, it tells you that A double prime D double prime minus B double prime C double prime will be 1. and therefore we have checked that if that this forms a group, because we do two times, you get this transformation. Is it okay? But then yeah, any question?
Repeat the last step where you said it from a group.
No. So I'm saying that so we have from this. So when you do two successive transformations, it is as if you're multiplying the matrix A, B, C, D different matrices with each other. Okay, then you get the new values of A, B, C, D. So if you do it n times, n transformations, all you do is take all these numbers, form these 2 cross 2 matrices and multiply them, and then you'll get the value after n. So if I do z to z1, then I do z1 to z2, then I do z2 to z3, and you keep on doing it for zn. Okay, here I take A, B, C, D. Here I take A1, B1, C1, D1. Here I take A2, B2, C2, D2. And I ask, if I do it directly from this to this, what will I get? It will just be A, B, C, D times A1, B1, C1, D1 dot times A n minus 1, B n minus 1, C n minus 1, D n minus 1. This is this will be given by A n, B n, C n, D n, which is the direct transmission from here to. Okay, and we know that this because the determinant is, if this is 1, if all these determinants are 1, then this determinant is also 1, and so that is why this forms a group. That means it's still a conformal transform. It's still of the type AB AZ, meaning if you do n times also, it is still of this form, AZ plus B over CZ plus D, where AD minus BC is 1. That property is preserved, right? So therefore it is still of the same form, and therefore it's a group. Okay, you have to also check the inverse, but all of them will be satisfied. So I mean, so for being a group, what you have to do, one is you have to check that closure property, right? So closure, that's what we check right now. The closure property we check. Then you have the thing that identity element is there or not. Identity is trivially there because you just take A to be 1, B to be 0, C to be 0, and D to be 1. And this is also this identity is also AD minus BC equal to 1. So this is also part of this. And the third is we have to say inverse. Well, the inverse, how do you check? Inverse is simple. Inverse just means from what we said right now, we have to just take A, B, C, D and take the inverse of that. That will be the, because right, because we just said that if you have to do this thing, you just take the inverse. So you just take the inverse of this matrix, because the determinant is +1, the inverse exists, and so this is the inverse matrix. This is the inverse matrix. Okay, so all of them exist. So it's a group. Closure exists, identity exists, inverse exists, so it's a group. Okay, but which group is this? As we saw that it is the it is just we know this is the SO31 group, because we saw from other ways that this is the SO31 group. But when we write it in this form, that Z prime is equal to AZ plus B over CZ plus D, we saw that the group is isomorphic to the group of 2 cross 2 complex matrices with determinant +1, right? Because all we are doing is matrix multiplication. So this group, if you write it in this form, is isomorphic to this group, the group of, so it is isomorphic to the group of 2 cross 2 complex matrices with determinant 1. You understand why I'm saying this? Because the group is just the same as this, because all we are doing is matrix multiplication, right? And each ABCD corresponds to one group element, because it corresponds to one conformal transformation. Each ABCD corresponds to a single conformal, to some particular conformal transformation. Okay, just like any Poincare transformation, you have to specify some rotation, some boosts, and some translation. That is a particular Poincare transformation. So similarly, any conformal transformation means you are specifying A, B, C, D. For different values of A, B, C, D, you are getting different conformal transformations, right? but we saw that these are in one-to-one correspondence with these matrices A, B, C, D, because when you go from one transformation to other transformation, the matrices get multiplied. It's as if you're multiplying matrices, right? So the set of conformal transformations is one-to-one correspondence with the set of 2 cross 2 complex matrices with determinant +1. Okay, but not exactly, because if I took A, B, C, D and I multiplied all of them by -1, right? Suppose I took this transformation. This is the same as A Z plus B over C Z plus D, right? Because the minus will just cancel. Okay, so that means both A, B, C, D and minus A, minus B, minus C, minus D are the same conformal transformation. Is it clear what I'm saying? So I'm trying to see that what is this transformation? This is the set of all 2 cross 2 complex matrices, because if you specify A, B, C, D, you have got one conformal transformation, right? And they are multiplying like matrices. So it is the set of conformal transformation is in correspondence with the set of complex matrices, 2 cross 2 complex matrices with determinant +1. Is this statement clear?
Yes.
But conformal transformation, if I take instead of A, B, C, D, I take minus A, minus B, minus C, minus D, that is the same conformal transformation, because the minus will just cancel in the denominator and numerator. But as a matrix, these two are not the same matrices. These are two different matrices. Okay. So that means the conformal transform at the level of conformal transformations, we are identifying these two matrices. We're saying that both of these matrices are the same matrix as a conformal, are the same conformal transformation. Both these matrices are the same conformal transformation. Okay, even though as matrices they are different, they're same conformal transformations. Now these 2 cross 2 matrices, 2 cross 2 complex matrices with determinant +1, this has a name. It is called special linear SL2C group. It's called the SL2C group. It forms a group we have seen, but the group is called the SL2C group, right? And the name is exactly the same as the way you name SO2 or SO3 or SO4 or SO31. So the S corresponds to a statement. It's special, meaning determinant is +1. L just means linear. Okay, it's a matrix. 2 means it's 2 cross 2 matrices, and C means that the entries are all complex. So the entries are complex. 2 stands for it is 2 cross 2 matrix. SL stands for special linear, which means it's a matrix and it is determinant is +1. Okay, so the set of all A, B, C, D complex matrices with determinant +1 is the group SL2C. Okay, but this group is not. But the conformal transformation is not SL2C. What is it? It is actually you have to. It is obtained by take the elements here and then you identify each element and the minus of this element, right? This thing is, we have done it in group theory when we were discussing group theory. This is actually called quotienting. So this if you take the element -1 0 0 -1, okay, if you take this group SL2C, first of all, this is an element in this group, because if you take the determinant, it is +1. Okay, and let's call this element G. So this group, but this G square is identity, because if you take square, it is identity. So this element and the identity element 1 0 0 1, let's call it E. This forms the group Z2. If you remember from our group theory discussions, this forms a group Z2 because G square is identity. So this is the group Z2. The group Z2 is just identity and G, where G square is equal to identity. This forms the group Z2. And because this group is abelian, because it's an abelian group, because just identity and minus identity, so it will commute. Okay, because its group is abelian, this is also a normal subgroup. I don't know whether you remember these words. The normal subgroup. Normal subgroup means if you form a coset, then the left coset and right coset are the same. It forms a normal subgroup. And the cosets, how do you form the cosets? So if you take any group element G, okay, and then you multiply by this Z2, by this this Z2 subgroup. You multiply from this side or you multiply from the other side, is the same thing. So multiplying means that if you take G, this is a set which is actually G and minus G, because Z2 has identity and -1. So this is G and minus G, and this is the coset. This is the coset corresponding to Z2. I'm saying all these things because you've already done it once, so that's why I'm saying these things. It will be you can remember it from your this thing. So Z2 is the so when you're forming a Z2 coset of SL2C. Okay, so this is the coset. The coset contains elements G and minus G, any G and minus G. Okay, that. But because it's a it's a normal subgroup, you can take a quotient, which is you can take this this thing by Z2, which means if you call this as a single element, let's call it G, then this quotient itself is a itself is a group. It's called the quotient group. If this subgroup is not normal, then this is not a group. But if the subgroup is a normal subgroup, then this is a group, and this is called a quotient group. Okay, and this quotient group and this dividing by Z2 means you're taking this, you're identifying this as one element of this quotient. So the element of this quotient group is each element of the quotient, meaning for every G and minus G, there's an element in the quotient group. But that is exactly what we want for a conformal transformation. The conformal transformation means G and minus G are identified, and therefore the quotient group is the conformal transformations, conformal group. Okay, but the conformal group we know is SO31. So what we can say from here is that if you take this SL2C and you do the quotient group by the Z2, which is a normal group, this is isomorphic to SO3. This is the result. And well, usually I wouldn't have said that, but since we have done the group theory class, that's why I'm saying these things. So what are we saying? That first, from the conformal transformation part, we see that if you choose a particular value of ABCD, then that is a conformal transformation. If for every value of ABCD, there's a conformal transformation. But not quite, not just ABCD. ABCD and minus A, minus B, minus C, minus D, they are both the same conformal transformation. Okay, that's the second statement. And these are in one-to-one correspondence with the group of matrices with determinant 1 and complex entries, because these when you do many conformal transformations, you're just multiplying matrices. So these are in one-to-one correspondence with the complex matrices of determinant 1, which is the SL2C group. But it is not one-to-one correspondence with SL2C. It is 2-to-1 correspondence, meaning for every two elements, ABCD and minus A, minus B, minus C, these are two separate elements. ABCD and minus A, minus B, minus C, minus D are two separate elements of SL2C. But both these elements correspond to the same element of the conformal transformation, conformal group. Okay. Now this thing we understood this statement in the mathematical form. That is this the Z2 group, that there is an element -1, 0, 0, -1. This is an element of SL2C because it also has determinant +1, and this squares to +1. So this is a subgroup of SL2C with the subgroup being G and E, meaning -1, 0, 0, -1, and the identity element. This itself forms a group, and the subgroup is SL2C. And because it is abelian, this is a normal subgroup. And then you can form a coset from these subgroups. And because it is normal subgroup, the left coset, right coset are the same. And the element of the coset is G minus G. For every G belonging to the SL2C, the coset element is G minus G. Okay. But this set of cosets is a group because Z2 is a normal subgroup. So the set of cosets is what is called the quotient. And this is because Z2 is a normal subgroup, this is a quotient group. Okay, and the elements of each of this quotient group, the elements of this quotient group are this set G and minus G. For every G, there is a G minus G corresponds to one element in the quotient group. But that is exactly what we said here, that every element G and minus G, G meaning ABCD and minus G meaning minus A, minus B, minus C, minus D. This is one element of the conformal group, and therefore we can immediately say that the quotient group is the conformal group. So the conformal group is not SL2C, but it is a quotient group of SL2C by the normal subgroup, which is Z2. Okay, and because the conformal group is SO31, we can say that SL2C by Z2 is isomorphic to SO31. Okay, SL2C by Z2 is isomorphic to SO31. All right. And this is very important actually when we understand spinors and all that. This SL2 is very important. Spinors of SO31, it's very important. But anyway, is this clear? I'm just assuming that you
Sir,
remember
by
the
capital G, you are denoting.
capital G. I'm denoting the element G minus G, and that is an element of the quotient group.
Okay.
Okay, so each element of the quotient group
Okay,
is equivalent to one set Gn minus G. And but Gn
Okay.
minus G is the same as A, B, C, D, and minus A minus B minus C minus D. And we said that this set is equivalent to CT, conformal transformation group, conformal group. Therefore, we can identify the quotient group with the conformal group. So the conformal group is not SL2C, but the quotient of SL2C by Z2. Okay, which is the normal subgroup. And Z2 is what? Z2 is the group of two matrices. One is the identity matrix, and the other is the minus identity matrix. -1 0 0 -1. It's a subgroup of SL2C because -1 0 0 -1 is also a SL2C because determinant is still +1. Okay, so it's a subgroup, and because it's abelian, it's also a normal subgroup. Okay, so it doesn't matter whether you multiply G with Z2 or Z2 with G because Z2 is just identity and minus identity, so it is the same. So normal subgroup, and therefore we know that this coset must be a group, and that group is called the quotient group. And from this identification, we see this nice identification that SO31 is actually the quotient of SL2C by Z2. Okay. So, any questions up to this point? So, if you don't remember, then you can look back at your group theory notes and see whether you understand what we're saying. And if you don't understand, we can discuss it again next time. And here, so in just like in D greater than 2, we had said that you can form. We had looked for invariance, conformal invariance. We had looked at conformal invariance, and we had said that to form a conformal invariant, you need 4 points: x1, x2, at least 4 points, x4. You need at least 4 points. You can have more than 4 points, but you need at least 4 points to form a conformal invariant. And the invariants are called what are called cross ratios. So you can form a cross ratio which is x12 mod times x34 mod over x13 mod times x24 mod, and you can form another independent cross ratio which is x12 mod x34 mod divided by x14 mod x23 mod. So this I called U and this I called V. So these are the invariants under conformal transformations. And then I also said that if you have if there are n cross ratio n points, n is greater than or equal to 4, then the number of cross ratios is n into n minus 3 by 4 number of cross ratios. This I didn't prove, but I can prove it if somebody is interested. I can prove it, but it's not important. How the proof is not immediately important. So there are these number of cross ratios. Okay, and then I also said that that in higher in that if you have this if you have a conformal symmetry, then you can take any 3 points, arbitrary 3 points, let's say this one, and you can map them, these 3 points, to 0, 1 and infinity. You can map 1 point to 0, 1 point to 1, and 1 point to infinity. How do you do that? By using translation, you can always shift the origin of this to 1 point. So that means that point becomes now in the new coordinate system becomes 0. And then you can, by using rotation, you can just rotate this axis and you put one of the points on this z axis. Okay, and then you can use scaling to scale this to 1. Okay, and then by using special conformal transformation, you can take this point to infinity. Okay, you can take this point to infinity. So this is the way you can do it.
So that cross ratio, I mean, is there any proof of that it will remain invariant? Or
Yeah, I in fact I gave you as an assignment that this x1 minus x2 mod prime. So you have to show this, that x1 minus x2 mod prime is equal to x1 minus x2 over square root of 1 minus 2 b dot x1 plus b square x1 square times square root of 1 minus 2 b dot x2 plus b square x2 square. This is how it transforms. Distances transform like this in a special conformal transformation. Okay, so one thing, that the cross ratios are clearly invariant under translation, invariant under rotation because it's mod, and invariant under scaling because the above and numerator denominator will cancel. Only thing you have to check is whether it's invariant under special conformal transformation. And in the special conformal transformation, they gave us an exercise that you should check that this distances transform like this. You see now, so there's a factor of 1 minus 2 b x dot x1 plus b square x1 square root, and 1 minus 2 b dot x2 plus b square x2 square root. Now you see here, so you will get these denominator factors for every 1 and 2. You will get these denominator factors. Okay, so in the numerator you have x1 minus x2 into x3 minus x4. So you will get one factor of this, one factor of this, then you will get one factor of x3 and one factor of x4, right? But the same thing you will get the denominator also, because there also you have x1, x1 3, x2 4. So from here you will get from the x1 3 part you will get the square root of x1 and x3, and then from x2 4 you will get x2 and x4, and therefore these denominators will cancel. Okay, so if you can prove this, you have all you have to show is you have to prove this. If you prove this, then it is simple that the cross ratio is invariant. So this is what I had given as an exercise, that try to prove this, that under conformal transformation, because you know the conformal transformation, what is the special conformal transformation, you know, it is x prime mu is x mu minus b mu x square over 1 minus 2 b dot x plus b square x square. Just use that and find this. It is complicated, but it can be done. Okay.
Sir?
Yes.
So here these 3 points that can be mapped to 0, 1 and infinity. What was the point there? What was the point that you are trying to make there?
Yeah. So no. So the point, I'm just stating it as a fact. I will use this later when I talk about conformal, when I talk about quantum theory. So right now I'm just stating it as a fact that using a conformal transformations, I can map any 3 points. I can fix the value of 3 points. Okay, what I'm trying to say is that why this is important we will see later when we do correlation functions in quantum theory. But right now the statement is that, see, if you had only translation symmetry, if you have translation symmetry, then I have the freedom to choose my origin to be any point, right? So what that means is that I can choose the coordinate of any one point to be 0. So I can fix by using translation symmetry, I can fix the coordinate of one point to be 0. Whichever point I want, I can choose it to be 0 origin. Okay, if you have rotation on top of that, then let's say there's another point, then I can once I've translated here, I can then rotate this thing and I can put that point on the z-axis. So if I have both translation and rotational symmetry, then one point I can fix completely to be the origin, and the other point I can say that the second point, the y and x coordinates are 0 and z is non-zero, because I can just rotate this axis and so that the z-axis passes through that point, right? So if I have translation, I can completely fix the coordinate of one point. If I have rotation, I can fix the coordinate of one point, and I can fix the x and y axis of the other point to be 0, and z will be whatever it is. I cannot change z. Z is not in my hands, but I can at least fix one point to be 0, the y and x to be 0. That's all I can do. If I have scaling, what can I do? I can actually take this z, the z I can scale to 1. So if I also have scaling, then I can choose one point to be 0, x1 to be 0, and the second point, x2, I can take to be 0, 0, and z equal to 1. If I have scaling also, rotation, translation, and scaling. And what I'm saying is that if you have special conformal transformation, then I can also choose another point. I can put that other point at infinity. Now, normally we will not put points at infinity, but because we are doing conformal transformation, infinity is a valid point. You have to remember this always. The infinity, unlike when we do normal case where infinity is a bad point, right? Because there is no point as infinity. But here, infinity is a good point. I mean, good point meaning it is you can access infinity. You can access infinity by a special conformal transformation. Okay, so you can put 1 point at 0, 1 point at 1, and the third point you can move it to infinity. So right now, just a statement that you can fix the value of 3 points. Why it will be important, we will see when we do correlation functions in the quantum theory. Okay.
Okay, sir.
Okay, and in 2 dimensions, again, if you have you have got 2 invariants again, and that invariance, if you have 4 points, you'll have the invariants are Z12. One is the invariance you can write in complex coordinates as Z12, Z34 over Z13, Z24, and its complex conjugate U bar, which is Z12 bar. Z12 means Z1 minus Z2. Okay, so when I say Z12, I mean Z1 minus Z2. Z12 bar, Z34 bar, Z13 bar, and Z24. These are invariants under conformal transformation, 2-dimensional conformal transformations. Okay, under any local conformal transformation also, these things are invariants. And any conformal transformation will be invariant. Okay. So
Sir, this you have written U bar or V bar? The right
U
hand
bar.
side.
So the complex conjugate.
Okay.
So complex conjugate. Okay. So the real part of this, real imaginary part of this are this what I call U and V here. The real imaginary part of this will be the U and V. Okay. Yeah. So this, actually this is a good point to stop, because this is where we have finished the first part. The first part was the space-time action of what is the definition of conformal transformations and what is its action on space-time. So this is the first part, space-time action of the conformal group. Meaning, how does the conformal group act on space-time, on d-dimensional space-time? Okay, we saw that the conformal group is isomorphic to SOD, 2. We saw that what are the set of continuous conformal transformations. We saw what kind of functions are invariant under these conformal transformations. Okay, and then we yeah, so these things we saw. So the next point, so from next class, I'll start with the physics. So I'll start with classical conformal field theory. Classical conformal field theory. And then after that, then we come to the main point, which is the quantum conformal field theory. Okay, here this is mainly we will talk about Noether's theorem and the conserved currents, and then we'll also talk about the conformal representations. These are the 2 things we will do here. So conformal representations. So what that means is that you know that when we do Poincare transverse symmetry, then we know that the fields that we have are vectors, scalars, spinors, and so on. So those are the representations of the Lorentz algebra. Now we have to see what are the representations of the conformal algebra. Okay, so other way of saying is that when we talk about representations of the Lorentz algebra or the Poincare algebra, we talk about spin and we talk about mass. What is the mass of the field? What is the spin of the field? Here the question we are asking is what numbers you have to specify to specify a representation completely. Okay, and yeah, so that's what you will do. That's the conformal representation part, and we have to see Noether's theorem. That means if you have a symmetry which is conformal symmetry, then what are the corresponding conserved charges? That is what we will talk about. So we will start with d greater than 2, and then we will go to d equal to 2 case. Okay, and we will for our purpose we will always completely restrict ourselves to Euclidean. I mean, we will not specify Euclidean or Lorentzian because it will not be needed. But if I have to ever take an example, I'll always do Euclidean because the Lorentzian just follows. And in any case, when we do quantum theory, we will do the Euclidean case only, and then we will get the results in the Lorentzian theory by a Wick rotation. So that is what. Is it okay? So next class is on Tuesday, I think. So we will, yeah. So this is a good point to stop. Are there any questions? And
Sir,
one
is
more thing,
Saturday class
if somebody has come, has joined later, please just send me a chat message saying present. Just write present on the. If somebody has joined later when I asked you to write, so if you have if you are not there, then just write present in the chat box. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Saptasha.
Sir, এই Saturday class নেবেন?
Oh, Saturday. Acha, acha. Saturday I'll take in the morning. Are you free in the morning or afternoon?
I think আমাদের সকালে একটা class আছে, maybe.
Acha, acha. Okay, then we can do it in the afternoon. If everybody is actually, yeah, afternoon. Okay. So
Sir,
we can
আর
have a class.
assignment একটু পাঠিয়ে দেবেন।
Assignment I'll send it by tomorrow.
Sir, the timing of the class Saturday?
Saturday we can have at 1:30 p.m. Sorry, 2:30 p.m. Is it okay?
3 will be better. if
Sir,
possible.
3 will be better.
Sorry, 3. Okay, yeah, 3 p.m.
Sir, hello.
হ্যাঁ স্যার, 3-তে আবার যারা হোস্টেলে আছে ওদের ওই টিফিনের প্রবলেম হতে পারে।
Oh, acha. Then we can do it in the evening then. In that case, is 6 o'clock okay?
Yes, sir.
Hello.
6 or
Yes,
5.
sir.
Sir, yes.
Yeah. So if 6 o'clock is okay with everybody, we can have it at 6 o'clock. Okay. Any other questions?
Sir, what does it mean by conformal invariant?
Meaning what is those functions of x position which does not change under conformal transformation. So like in the case of rotation, rotational invariant means distance is invariant, right? Under rotation, distance between 2 points is invariant under rotation, right? So we will say that distances are rotation invariants. Okay. And if you have a scaling invariant, will be ratios of distances will be scaling invariant, because if you scale, the denominator and numerator will cancel, so it's a scaling invariant. So scaling invariant means it is a ratio of the distances. So if you have x1 minus x2 mod over x3 minus x4 mod, x3 minus, or x1 minus x3 mod, then it is invariant under rotation and scaling. It is invariant under rotation because it's a distance, and it is under scaling because the numerator scaling and denominator scaling factor cancels.
But sir, conformal transformation does not preserve length, so how?
Yeah, it doesn't preserve length. So length is not a conformal invariant. What is a conformal invariant? Is the cross ratio. So this is the invariant. Length is not invariant, but this cross ratio is invariant. So that's why
Okay,
length is not a
got it.
conformal invariant.
Okay.
Okay.
So separately, x1 to x34 are not invariant, but the
Are not
ratio
invariant.
are.
Yeah, the ratios are invariant. Yes. That is because the special conformal transformation, under special conformal transformation, the length transforms like this. Length between 2 points transforms like this. You see, the denominator has 2 factors. For each x1 and x2, there is 2 factors. It's an identical factor, just one factor for x1, one factor for x2. Okay. So now in the numerator you have x1 2 times x3 4. So you will get this one factor in the denominator from x1 x2 and also from x3 x4, right? But denominator also you have x1 3 and x2 4. So there also you'll get the same factors. So those factors will cancel. That's why they are invariant. You understand? So if you can show this result, that result follows. That's yeah. So conformal invariant means what is invariant under conformal transformation. That is what conformal invariant means. Okay. Okay. So yeah. So from next time we will start with classical conformal field theory. So any questions? Okay, if there are no questions. Yes.
Sir, I have a question. So, like angular momentum generates rotation. Is there something like scaling generator?
Yeah,
is there some?
Yes. So that is what. So for that you have to go to field theory, right? So that is what we'll do next time. The Noether's theorem is exactly for that. So we will find what are the conserved currents for scaling and so on.
Okay, sir.
Okay then.